Thank you very much for inviting me. Welcome, Zigor Olivier, to the CISA. My name is Adam Lobel. I'm a postdoctoral fellow here that's designing analog games to teach children about their emotions and emotion regulation skills. And in terms of my background, I'm a psychology researcher turned game designer. And my close to like about a decade of research career goes back to my time in my hometown of Brooklyn, where I studied psychology at Brooklyn College, and then I spent a semester abroad at the University of Amsterdam during my bachelor's, which led me to do a research master's in psychology. And I was always interested in emotion. I always did emotion research while I was there, and after finishing my research master's, I spent some time at another university in Amsterdam doing research about embodied emotion and gait. And then from there, I was recruited to join this PhD program where I did research about the benefits of video games, especially for like social and emotional development. And as part of that project, I wrote a review which has been highly influential about the benefits of video games, and I performed several other studies. I wanted to quickly talk about some of the games that I got to work with that are kind of in this serious game space. And these are games that I worked with during my PhD. Some of them I even did some work on in terms of design. And I'm just going to kind of briefly give an overview of these games because I think that they help inform my current work and the way that I think about the games that I'm currently designing. So the first is a game called Sparks. Sparks is a game developed in New Zealand by researchers and clinicians. And Sparks is a game that's designed as a depression intervention and depression prevention program. And it sort of, as you can kind of see maybe from the art style a bit, it sort of borrows from like RPG-style games in terms of the art. There's an overworld, and there are several different sections within the game, each with their own distinct characteristics. And those areas in the game are all based off of different modules from cognitive behavioral therapy. So like the gold standard within the psychology world of how people are treated for mood disorders, depression, and anxiety. They sort of took each of those modules and they created like a little sub-educational game part out of it. Highly didactic, a lot of question answers with little mini games to try to flesh out what those lessons are. It's one of the games I worked on, or with, I should say. The second is a game called Dojo. Dojo also is a game that's designed to train sort of emotional competencies. It's a biofeedback game, so it uses players' heart rate while they're playing the game. And it has these different mini-games which are also kind of based off of these established trainings, and it translates those trainings into games that use biofeedback. So as in one example, one of the games is sort of like imagine like a three-dimensional Pac-Man where you have to navigate a maze, and you're being chased by a ghost, just like in Pac-Man. And when the game detects that you have very high arousal, like your heart rate is very high, then it makes it that your character has to move slower, and now it's possible for you to be caught. And so it's trying to train you to regulate your emotions and your physiological arousal in the face of stress and conflict, is just as a small example of one of those games. The third game that I wanted to quickly talk about is a game called Deep. It's a virtual reality game that's currently now still in development. It's a beautiful game. It's a game that puts players in this underwater setting. And it's also a biofeedback game, but this actually uses a breathing monitor. And so it basically is trying to get you to use your breathing in a healthy pattern from good inhaling and good exhaling as a way of navigating the space. It's more of like a meditative sphere center with a breathing training tacked onto it. And finally, there's this game called Nevermind that I worked with. And Nevermind is also a biofeedback game. It's more in the entertainment world than in the serious game world. So you could kind of put these as like hardcore serious game, medium core serious game, kind of softcore serious game, also meditation experience. And this is much more in the entertainment world. It also uses heart rate variability, but now it also has sensors to do facial recognition of emotion as well. And the core premise of the game is that you're trying to solve puzzles in these nightmarish environments, and the more stress that you feel during play, the more nightmarish the environments become. So the threat increases. So once again, you're being challenged to regulate your stress in the face of fear. It's an entertainment game. It's an excellent game. You can buy it. It's definitely on the cutting edge, I would say, of biofeedback games. So these are all the things that I kind of bring to my work, and I should, as a final kind of personal aside, I think it's also worth mentioning that I myself am a gamer, and I've been a gamer for a long time. And whenever I mention that, I try to make clear like what, gamer is a very big thing. So for anyone that's interested, these are sort of the games that stick out the most for me from all my gaming years. So now here I am. From like 9 months ago, I was recruited here at the CISA to develop these analog games to teach children about their emotions. And I really saw taking this position as an ideal shift from my predominantly research-focused work to a much more applied domain. And basically, being in charge of this project has forced me to really reflect on my work in the past and to really develop a stronger concept of how can we make good, serious games. So in my estimation, kind of like the burning questions that underlie my work, and I think generally people that make serious games, is, well, what is learning and what is play? And on maybe a more meta level, where do they meet? And I'm going to try on a conceptual level to kind of flesh out where my current thinking of this is. I mean, this is just kind of the product of the last few months. So follow with me, if you will. Challenge me, if you like. After kind of fleshing out sort of the way I'm thinking about this conceptually, I'm going to show some of the games that we've been working on and how I kind of apply this conceptual framework, if you will, to the games that we're making. Okay, so what is learning? I just hope that the neuroscientists in the audience don't find what I'm going to say comically oversimplified, but I've been getting very narrowed down into thinking about learning. Just let's define it as the process whereby the brain builds connections. And our brain is this almost unimaginably vast network of 100 billion neurons, and they're all kind of reaching out. Almost, I think about it almost as if they're like looking for purpose. They're trying to make connections as much as they can. And so these neurons are reaching out, and then some of them fire together at the same time. And when they fire together, they're wiring together, they're making these connections. And if on top of that, there's some sort of reward, you were right, you get the treat, whatever it is, then the neurons say, oh, good, we should keep doing this. We should keep firing together, keep wiring together. It's almost like the way that your muscles grow out of exercise. I was in Israel traveling a couple weeks ago, and my Hebrew isn't very good, and I was walking along the beach, and I remember there was like a young boy, and he was kind of maybe like 7 or 8 years old, and he was kind of playing around with it, as kids do at the beach, of course, because it's such a novel environment almost. They're playing around in the sand and the water and splashing around, and he's like talking very jubilantly to his parents. And I don't really understand what he's saying, but kind of thinking about where I am in my work and not understanding what he's saying, what it meant to me when I heard him was, my brain is growing. Dad, Mom, it's like there's connections, like I'm figuring things out, right? So when I think about like serious games or education in general, the challenge that I see facing people is to kind of like align this natural curiosity, the natural desire for our neurons to make connections, the natural desire for us to learn new things, together with, to marry that natural curiosity with practical, useful things, right? We decide as a society it's practical and useful to know this, so I'm going to educate you so that your curiosity takes you to that point. And so kind of when we think about the multitude of information that's in the outside world, and we think about the multitude of possible connections that could possibly be made by these hundreds of, 100 billion neurons, that to me is a representation of chaos. And when we're educating, I think what we're doing is we're trying to bring order to that chaos. And like I said, we've kind of discovered these truths in this world, and we say these truths are important. And so I'm going to now teach you how to bring those truths as a method of orderly managing the chaos that could be going on. And so for education, like what's generally done is we kind of stamp these truths into our pupils, right? We're going from chaos to order by saying, here's a truth, now repeat after me, and repeat after me, right? And sometimes, right, we'll explain why this is true, of course, that we explain theory, or why this piece of order is a good way of managing the chaos. But generally, the main method, it seems to me at least, of how we're teaching people is by saying, I'm going to assert the truth, now you, pupils, reassert it, and I'll give you a reward. So your neurons fire together, they wire together. Well, that's right, you get a treat, right? You get an A. And your neurons fire together, they wire together. Oh no, but that's wrong. no, you're going to get a C or a D. That they should not be wiring together. Don't build that connection, right? So in that sense, I look at learning very much as this endeavor that we take to tame the chaos by creating order. So fine, then what's play? Well, if we look at a kid's playground, I think immediately it's very self-evident that play is chaos. Like, it's just the screaming, the running, almost unpredictable kind of changes in motivation and movement and direction that we see, right? But I think that it's very easy for us, when looking at this chaos, to miss the fact that there actually is an order surrounding it. So I think that when we're at play, we're allowing this chaos to run free, so long as it does so within certain confines. So we can even think about when kids try to play house. They try to pretend that they're living in this domestic environment, taking all these roles: the father, the mother, the oldest child. Maybe one of them wants to be a dog, and you say, well, that's kind of strange, but oh no, that fits in the box. There can be a dog, and then, well, maybe somebody says, well, I want to be the jet fighter pilot, and I go, well, no, that doesn't fit here. And this is sort of like fits with this like concept from Huizinga called the magic circle, which is just this sort of binding contract of everybody within this space where the chaos is allowed to go, but as long as it fits within certain confines. And so in that sense, it's like if learning is this endeavor to tame the chaos by creating order, then play is perhaps an endeavor to nurture the chaos. Let's have chaos, but within this self-defined space. And to kind of really wrap up my point here, I really think that there's kind of like a beautiful codependency between learning and play. Because if we think about, like, let's say a scientific theory, or when we try to find something true about the world, what we're doing is we're saying, well, here's the boundary around the chaos. And if this boundary sufficiently contains the chaos and explains it, I should be able to go in there, measure some things, and see that, yes, my rule, my boundary makes sense. And the boundary is able to sufficiently account for the chaos inside it. And so in a sense, it's like by living in that chaos, that's when we can test the truth. We can test whether or not there is something there that can provide order. So again, fine, you found some truth, right? We found this useful, practical skill or knowledge which we want to be teaching our kids. 2 + 2 = 4, and then maybe 2 × 3 = 6, and then maybe someday a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and then maybe someday e equals mc squared, right? Where we make, when we're educating, we make people kind of etch these truths into their brain, but the system is such that we kind of skip the play. We don't really allow them to go through the chaos to discover the truth. We say, I have the truth, here's the box, apply it and realize it. And so by skipping out on it, going through the chaos, and I understand why, because when you allow chaos, there's of course the fear that you're just going to learn the wrong thing. You're not going to walk out of it with the truth. But for those who do have this powerful sense of ownership and also a richer understanding of why something is true. And so my philosophy when I'm designing my games to teach people is I'm trying to create systems where the players go through the chaos and they teach themselves. So that I'm trying to, in essence, like reverse engineer the process of experiencing chaos in order to find the truth. That's what I strive for, because I think that much better than me teaching the player something, they can better teach themselves. As long as we're able to come up with a system whereby that happens. Game designers seem to know this very instinctively, right? So the first challenge that you have with the game that you put forward for people to play is getting them to learn how to play it. And so teaching them the game is step number one. And then once you've done that, as Daphne was saying, now you have the challenge of keeping the player engaged at all times, because you want them to successively get better and better at your game. And, well, if that's going to happen, then they're going to get bored, because if the challenge stays the same and their ability is increasing, then you've lost them. So this is, I think this is, this is all to say that I think game designers have an instinctive appreciation for this process, and they work very hard to make sure that there's an ongoing increase in skill together with an increase in challenge to keep players kind of in that chaotic space. So yeah, that's what I try to do. And what I'd like to do now in the next, let's say, 10 minutes is just talk about a couple of games that we're in the process of designing. Some of them are closer to finishing than others, and kind of talk you through a bit like how it is that I think that these games exemplify this design philosophy. So these are 4 of the games that we have. I think I'll have time to talk about 2. I'm happy to talk about them at any time. Again, these are all analog games, so they're basically all card-based. I guess Nightmares is also board game-based, but these are all basically card-based games. So I'm going to talk about the first one is Action. So Action is a game that we designed in order to train 3 primary skills: emotion, vocabulary, which means what it sounds like, giving a richness of words that people have to describe their different emotions. Emotion granularity, which is quite related. It's the idea that you might have many emotions that are very kind of closely similar together in their experience, like sad, depressed, remorseful, right? And for many people, sometimes those emotions might cluster together very closely, meaning that the experience of them are very similar. And granularity means that you're actually able to better pinpoint when you're experiencing those emotions, which all might be very similar but aren't quite the same. And finally, simple emotion recognition. And we got these all, again, from the literature. So we come from the scientific research, and we know that these are things that are beneficial for children in our age range, which is from 9 to 11, to train their emotion regulation skills so that they can better regulate themselves. So Action is a team-based game. You break up into 2 teams, and each team has on every turn, every team has 1 actor, and the remaining people on their team are their audience. And what's public knowledge is that the actor is going to have to act out a different scene from a potential movie, and the director is going to tell the actor in secret, so the actor rolls a die, keeps it secret to them, one of these different emotions. So in this scene, I want you to be sad. And then, for example, the actor draws a card at random, and this card represents like a cue card, like from a movie, a line from a script, so to speak. So you would say one of these sentences. And the game is set up in such a way that the emotions are not necessarily going to match with the sentences. So something like, I found a giant bug in my burger, you wouldn't say that in a happy way, right? But for children, like having to suss that out and understand how can I convey happiness where the content is not the same can be quite a challenge. And you can have very amusing combinations, of course. So that's generally how the game is played. It's very simple. You have a list of emotions, you have to perform one of them, you get a card, you act it out in front of your group, and then your group has to talk about what emotion they think it was, and if the group is correct, then you get a point, and if not, then you move on. Very simple game. So where does it all kind of come from? So there's two major sources for where we got the idea for this game. The first is the idea, actually, of the emotional Stroop. So the Stroop task, are people familiar with the Stroop task? I know, of course. Pardon?
We've been through it quite a few times. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So conceptually, we thought it would just be interesting to do exactly what I just said, where you have the content, which would presumably convey one emotion, and the emotion that you need to convey, and them potentially not matching, and working through that disconnect. The second source of inspiration was a curriculum that's been developed as part of this social emotional learning existing program called Ruler. And Ruler is a widely adopted curriculum for training emotional skills. And within Ruler, you have the Feeling Words curriculum. And the Feeling Words curriculum tries to teach children as many words as possible. So it goes for this emotion vocabulary, emotion granularity. And so we thought, instead of doing it in the way that Ruler does it, which is giving you like a homework assignment about, do an essay about the word remorseful, or do an interview about the word remorseful, or explain in your history class how somebody in this historical account might have felt remorse, right? That's how you would learn those words in the Feeling Words curriculum. We thought, well, let's bring it a little bit more to life and make people act it all together. And so now built into the game, the last point I'm going to make about it is kind of built into the game is a possibility for us to also increase levels of difficulty. So one of the ways you could do difficulty is you could increase the number on the list to 9 emotions. But another thing that's quite interesting in terms of emotion granularity is to kind of make cards which have emotions that are very well clustered together, like the difference between surprised and alarmed, and maybe there's an overlap there with confused, and maybe even terrified and surprised, or terrified and thrilled. When you play this game with kids, or actually we've now played it with kids, we've played it with adults, we're really happy and excited to see what we designed for. And that is that the groups all debate about the performance they've just witnessed. And you hear things like, well, I don't really think it's terrified. I really think it's, surprised. Because if it was terrified, he would have done this, and then the person does a gesture. But no, he didn't. He did this. And these are this isn't in the rule book. These are the things that emerge from the context. And that's why we think a game like this and the philosophy behind it has a lot of power and promise. So now the second, and I think the last game I'll talk about is this game Nightmares. So Nightmares is a game that we're developing in order to train cognitive reappraisal skills and theory of mind. So cognitive reappraisal is kind of like the goal, what does Andrea call it? Andrea calls it the queen of the of emotion regulation skills. It's the skill whereby when something happens to you and you feel one emotion, you're able to think about the event in a different way to change the way you feel about it. So you just missed your bus and you think, oh, you're infuriated. And then you thought, well, if I'd been on the bus, then I would have still been in a rush. Or now I have a few minutes to look over my work, and so I'll be more ready for the meetings I have today. Cognitive reappraisal, just making up an example right now. This is a key thing for people that deal with things like depression and anxiety, but just more broadly, it's a marker of healthy functioning, healthy emotion regulation functioning. And theory of mind is simply the skill to kind of better understand what other people are thinking, kind of take yourself out of yourself, which is something that kids are developing constantly and is very important for them to be developing. So Nightmares is this adventure game, and it's basically like a dungeon crawler where a team of nightmarers, they're called, are exploring this dungeon space. But each nightmare comes to the game with a different set of nightmares, which are things about their character's past, which are still terrifying them till today. And so in front of each character, they would have a number of these different symbols, and they're all, these are all things I've taken from the net, but they're sort of exemplifying the types of kind of abstract style art that's integral to the game's design. Because what happens in the combat is when the players encounter an enemy within the dungeon space, the enemy is going to randomly activate one of these nightmares, which is going to hinder them in combat. And in order for them to overcome that nightmare, they play a card from their hand. And again, this is another kind of image taken from the internet that shows the general idea of the art design. But the card itself is also a very kind of abstract image. And when they play this card, it's up to their teammates to decide which of these nightmares is the player trying to overcome. Because only the player who's in combat knows. And so the player might look, well, this looks like, falling down these skyscrapers, a fear of heights, and this looks like somebody, so maybe it's that. And then another player might say, well, yeah, but here we have somebody in this dark space with the light. Maybe it's this person here, bringing the moonlight more, right? Or maybe they say, well, but look over here, there's little sausages. Maybe it's the way that they use to tame the dog, right? Who knows, right? It's all these different possibilities. And this type of interaction isn't anything new under the sun. We're really just lifting it from existing mechanics out of games like Dixit and Mysterium. These are very well-established games that basically employ this mechanic. But we do so within this sort of adventure context, and as a way of showing them that afterwards, once the team has guessed, that their teammate is able to say, no, I wasn't thinking this, I was thinking that. I wasn't thinking about the sausage, I was thinking about this fear of heights. And it gives an opportunity for the other players to reappraise and also to better understand how it is that another person could be perceiving that given situation. And yeah, like I said, it's sort of like this dungeon crawler. So when I say that, kind of think of something like this, where what we know from playing games with our kids, we kind of have like a group of kids that we play with on a regular basis. What we know is one of like the most thrilling things for them in this age range is like the fear of the unknown, flipping over that next card and not knowing what it is. And there's a way in which sort of this idea of exploring a dungeon, which looks something like this, is very engaging. It keeps them wanting to keep doing these sorts of exercises. That's like I said, I have more things to talk about, but I think I'll just leave it at that. And just quickly say thank you all for your attention. Happy to talk more about all this stuff. And this is my doctoral thesis, and this is how you can contact me if you're interested in it. And I just want to also thank my mentors from my PhD from my time as a PhD, Isabel, Mariantina, and Rutger, as well as my collaborators here, David and Andrea, who created this project that I'm working on, the game designers that helped me develop as a game designer, Owen and Jeremy. Owen actually is the designer of that virtual reality game Deep, and my two students, Linda and Ornella, who are integral to making all these games together with me. So thank them, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.